104 days it lasted. New Zealand endured the harshest lockdown restrictions in the Western world, at least until Daniel Andrews got into gear. Jacinda Ardern locked down the country of 5 million very early on in the pandemic, closing all businesses bar servos, supermarkets and pharmacies, and earning praise from the once free press for her willingness to take control of the lives of her citizens. Nobody said a word about the fate of places like Queenstown, a distinctly international town that's thrived on tourists drawn in by the snow and sheer natural beauty. After all, it was about her commitment to saving lives, not livelihoods, and it worked. They eliminated community transmission of the virus and Jacinda literally did a little dance. Meanwhile, her country has just suffered the biggest single quarter drop in GDP in its history. 12.2% of the country's wealth just deleted in the space of 3 months. No wonder she was so willing to delay their elections. But so enamoured were the Australian media with her victory that they started pushing harsh restrictions on movement as a viable strategy here. They came to the conclusion that Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews should introduce a mythical stage 4 lockdown, and every single day from then on, our Premier was badgered about when it was coming and what it might look like, until the people were so scared as to want it. And all of this was backed up by think tanks like the Grattan Institute, claiming lockdowns were so effective that we'd all be dead without them. There was even talk of a travel bubble, where Kiwis and Aussies from virus-free backwaters would be able to resume the international tourism and trade that sustains both our nations. This would give foreign nationals more rights on Australian soil than Australian citizens. Unfortunately for Jacinda, Victoria didn't finish the job, and because of that, quote, compared to Australia, we're in a much better position, unquote. Never mind the fact that more people live in this state than in her entire country, closing the deal was never a part of the plan because it would lead to the exact scenario of stupid competition we're seeing with Australian state border closures right now. So where did we go so wrong? And what happened to the media's poster child across the ditch for virus elimination? Well, after 104 days of the virus-free life and all the freedom of a hermit kingdom, the New Zealand government recently announced they'd found a cluster. 4 new cases, a whole household simultaneously diagnosed with COVID-19 seemingly out of nowhere. With no quarantine breaches or traced contacts to blame, they've been investigating the possibility that the virus snuck across the ditch on packages of frozen meat from, wait for it, Victoria, the punching bag that keeps the Anzac spirit alive, the common enemy against which we can all unite. The truth is, though, that Jacinda Ardern took a gamble on behalf of the 5 million people she leads. That there would be a vaccine within a reasonable amount of time, maybe a year, and that NZ could survive on their own until then. Now, I believe it's grossly irresponsible to base critical public policy on something that might never happen, especially when it means treating your own citizens like prisoners for potentially years. But it's equally possible Kiwis don't mind their nation blinking out of existence in a globalised world. After all, Prime Minister Ardern has never held a job outside of politics. Never has she worked in the private sector she shut down for their own safety, and never has her livelihood depended on anyone generating a profit, which I suppose is exactly what you'd expect from the President of the International Union for Socialist Youth. The pain is for everyone else to bear in true elitist fashion. The publicans, retailers, hotel staff and cleaners in places like Queenstown get to deal with the shutdown while she does her little dance. So when 4 cases of COVID-19 were diagnosed in Auckland, she really didn't have a choice but to double down. Anything less would be an admission that her go hard, go early policy wasn't as perfect as her press pack lovies made out. Because if you can't even receive a shipment of meat without risking an outbreak, just maybe it's time we all reassessed the situation and started planning for the worst, even if we privately hope for the best. i.e., don't lock in your country's response on the basis of a vaccine that might never exist. If New Zealanders never want to leave their shores and spend the rest of their natural lives in their own little world with the Red Queen wrapping them in warm blankets, handing out mugs of cocoa, then that is their right. But Australia and the rest of the world does not exist in some sort of late 19th century bubble, and some of us would rather die than live a life stripped of the benefits of living in the greatest country on earth in the 21st century.